Jody and I spent our honeymoon in America, in the good old United States of America. In fact, I wanted to go to the West Indies, maybe Martinique, but of course I was taken over, and as often happens, I did not regret it at all. We flew British Airways from Heathrow and landed at JFK a few hours later, trying and failing to join the Mile High Club along the way. It didn't matter, as we soon made up for it by traveling up and down the East Coast, visiting New England and the surrounding area. Coming from Huntington in Cambridgeshire, close to Cambridge University, we particularly enjoyed our visit to Yale and Harvard, but the biggest surprise was how beautiful and rural New York State is. Not at all what we expected. 3 weeks later, Jody and I had, without a doubt, made love in more motels than the average American did in a lifetime. We enjoyed every minute and swore to each other on the plane back that we would be back soon. Great plan, great idea, but of course real life and our careers just got in the way. 9 years later, myself, Dave Martin, and my wife Jody found ourselves in our 30s, happily married with no children, and with a beautiful home with a full mortgage, like most people in our position at the time, but we live life to the fullest. I was recently appointed as a junior director at ALS Scans Limited, a company specializing in high-tech waste incineration plants in which we were world leaders in our niche sector. We were a small but growing company, and I was able to grow with it. Under my boss, George, who practically owned the company, I was fourth or fifth in line, I think. Jody was successful in her career, but as a teacher her advancement depended on both seniority and ability, and she was sometimes annoyed that I was getting ahead. Later I wondered if it was jealousy that made her do what she did. I would say without a doubt that we were still in love, maybe not with the passion we had when we first got married, but that was to be expected. Our sex life was pretty good, with the occasional week or two without sex when we were both under pressure, offset by more frequent bursts of activity when we were both in the mood. Our story begins when we were in the middle of a particularly long period of the former, but awaiting a well-deserved period of the latter. We haven't taken a holiday in almost a year, but Jody got off work from school last week, and the next day we were due to head off for a well-deserved break on the beaches of Spain. Jody dragged me out to buy new holiday clothes for both of us, although as expected I only got one pair of shorts. Unsurprisingly, Jody bought 4 or 5 new outfits, each one more revealing than the last. It was the last choice that triggered this in her. Jody tends to be quite adventurous and bold on holiday, and wear and do things she might not do at home. Apparently, she was already in a vacation mood that day, and the blouse she chose accurately reflected this fact. "Do you like it?" she asked, showing me the blouse. "It's a little transparent," I remarked, without much disapproval. "Then this is exactly what I need," Jody replied. "I think I need to try it on." She disappeared from view into the dressing room with its thin, black satin fabric, leaving me standing with 6 or 7 other guys, all waiting, like me, for their wives or girlfriends. I wondered if Jody would decide for herself, or if she would come out to show me what she was thinking. I thought she was wearing a pretty revealing bra this morning, so if she came out, a few guys would get a little pleasure. She went out. Straight into the waiting room, no peeking around the corner for me to come see what some of the girls were doing. I was wrong about one thing. It was probably a revealing bra that she had put on that morning, but since she had taken it off to show off her blouse, it didn't matter. Men's eyes, including mine, widened in surprise as Jody twirled around, showing off her new blouse. Well, nominally for me. She was black. She was thin. What more could I say? She covered for her well, sort of. She adequately covered her well, I couldn't say that. What word or phrase do I need? Did she hide it? No. Defended her virtues? Definitely not. It covered her breasts well? Not quite. Protected her modesty? Almost nothing. Could we and the other guys see the shape of her breasts? Heck, my wife Jody was showing off her breasts to all the guys like she was topless. The thin fabric of the blouse barely covered what was underneath. It would be less erotic if she was topless. And she loved it. I can't honestly say I was very upset about it, but she loved it, cheeky cow. Jody bought a blouse, and we went to the next store. Then we bought a new swimsuit, if you can call it that. She went into the fitting room, and for what seemed like a long time, finally, she pulled back the curtain and stood there for me to admire. Damn it, my heart started beating fast as I stood there looking at her, aware that at least a couple of other guys standing nearby were also enjoying themselves. Jody, it should be explained, is a rather attractive young woman, about 5'3" tall, quite slim, and with breasts that, although no larger than a B-cup, look like a challenge. "Where is the top?" I asked when I was able to regain my ability to speak. "We're going to Spain," Jody said joyfully. "Who wears a swimsuit top there?" This is true, as it turns out. We were there last year, and within an hour or two of arriving, my wife took off her swimsuit top and joined many other women who were topless. As far as I know, she never wore it again the entire time we were there. But a general store in Cambridge is not a beach in Spain. "Do you like it?" she demanded, arching her back slightly, further emphasizing how gorgeous her bare breasts were. "Love it," at least two of the admiring men responded before I could say anything. Jody giggled at the attention she was getting and turned to offer a different angle. "Can I take this?" she asked me as I stood there, not knowing whether I should be embarrassed or delighted by her demonstration. "Okay, you can take it," I told her before the whole situation got out of control. On the way home in the car, I started thinking. Jody didn't usually do this, so something was wrong. My wife Jody was one of those women who was strong and strong-willed, and when I upset her in some way, she felt she had to get back at me. 4 months ago, she flirted with one of her coworkers in front of me, and it ended with her kissing him on the dance floor while I stood and watched. After that, we had a terrible row as she humiliated me in front of everyone, and all she could say was that it was my fault. It turns out that I forgot the anniversary of our first date a few days ago, and she decided to take revenge on me. The anniversary of our first date. When the hell was the last time we celebrated that? And then, about a month after that, I came home late when we were supposed to go to dinner. It was only half an hour because I was stuck in traffic on my way back from a meeting with a client up north. 4 hours into the drive, and an accident on the highway earlier that day delayed me. I even called to warn him that I would be late, but that didn't help. When I got home, she had already left, leaving me a note saying she had canceled the dinner reservation. I don't know where she went. She just wrote that she would call later so that I could join her. Later turned out to be more than 3 hours later, and it was more of a demand to come and pick her up than an invitation to join her. I told her I was thinking about her and that she could make her own way home. She went out alone, which means she can return alone. There are plenty of guys here who would be happy to take me home, Dave. I just don't know how I can thank them for their kindness. These were her exact words. When I arrived at the club, I was furious. It didn't help when I found Jody surrounded by a group of young people, most of whom were 5 years younger than her, and who were clearly hoping for a special ending to the evening. The revealing dress she almost wore didn't make their choice any less successful or reassure me. When I approached the group, I said, "Sorry, guys," I said, carefully pushing through them, carefully moving their hands away. "It's time for this lady to go home." "Go to hell, buddy," one of them replied, trying to push me away. "We were the first. Find your own bun." "It's okay, guys," Jody intervened. "It was my husband who came to save me. Sorry to interrupt the evening, but I'm afraid I have to go home with him." Damn, it looked like it could end in a fight, and I wouldn't stand a chance against that crowd. They were unhappy. It was obvious that they believed that Jody was teasing them, and by prior arrangement, I showed up to take away their entertainment, and two of them, including the cheeky one, began to push me. It's been a few years since I've been in any kind of fight, not since I was in school. But I'm not one to give up easily, so I reciprocated. It started to get out of control until Jody intervened again. "That's enough, guys," she reproached them. "Leave him alone, okay?" This calmed them down a little, but the atmosphere remained very tense. "Okay, guys," Jody continued, as if enjoying the situation. "I'll give each of you a kiss goodbye, and then it's time for my husband and I to go home. This might have appeased them, but it infuriated me. Kiss at least one of them, Jody, I shouted at her. And don't even think about coming home tonight. Dead end. People around us began to move away, and the bartender began to remove the glasses in front of us. Most of the group of young men were ready to leave, but the two bullies were just as annoyed as I was. Things could come to a fight, and I would find myself in the very center of it. Suddenly, two huge bouncers came up and started separating us. I can't say that I wasn't happy about it, although I was excited and ready to go to the end. "You stay here," one of the bouncers said to a group of young men, pushing them back, and then turned to me. "I advise you to leave, boy, before you get hurt," he told me, "and take this bitch with you." There are times when you stand up for your wife when she is insulted, and times when discretion is the better part of courage. I chose the second and easier solution and pulled Jody along with me. Besides, at that moment I agreed with his assessment. On the way home we were silent, but when we returned home we again had a terrible row. We barely spoke to each other for 3 days, and I warned her that if she ever did anything like that again, the consequences would be dire. So, onto the fitting room incidents and what caused them. "Just a warning shot," she told me. "You know, I'm not happy that you're working tomorrow morning when we leave, so that was a warning." Well, in my opinion, crazy as she was, there is a big difference between showing off your breasts to strangers and actually flirting with them like she used to do. The truth is that it actually turned me on a lot, and the thought of Jody wearing her skimpy outfits and being topless in a swimsuit in front of other guys on vacation really interested me. It's all a matter of degree. It never bothered me that other guys looked at her, but touching is a completely different matter. That night we made love. When I finally came to my senses, I wondered how many other wives or girlfriends had enjoyed such a night of passion because their husbands remembered how gorgeous Jody was and imagined themselves making love to her. The next day I only had one meeting with Butch. Butch was one of those more real than real guys who came from America to look at our products. My boss George visited them a couple of weeks ago, and now Butch has come to see us in action. My job was to walk him through the production process and then take him to a working factory. My plan was to have a quick lunch with him and then leave, leaving myself plenty of time to get home, change and drive to Stansted Airport to catch our evening flight. Jody was furious when I told her what I would do, demanding that I cancel the meeting with Butch and get someone else to take my place. I tried to explain how important this meeting was for our company and how entering the huge American market could lead to expansion for us and even greater prospects for me. She was unhappy, and no doubt that was what led to the demonstration the day before. "You think more about your damn job than about me," she shouted at me when I refused to comply with her request. I refrained from mentioning the numerous times we canceled plans because of her school responsibilities, knowing that everything would be fine once we were on the plane. I knew Jody could be self-centered and righteous at times, but I knew that when I married her, so I couldn't complain too much. I patted her as I left, gave her a peck on the cheek, and confirmed that she should be ready and packed when I got home in a few hours. "If you're even a minute late, you'll regret it," Jody told me with a little more venom than I thought was appropriate. The meeting went well, extremely well in fact. I found that I got along well with Butch, having only met him briefly on his previous visit a few months ago. He asked me some extremely detailed questions, but I handled them well, and by the end of the morning I was pretty sure that we would confirm the order soon. "Where are we going for lunch?" He asked me around 11:30, and I suggested a local pub where we could have a quick snack and a beer. "No," he answered me. "Let's go to that place, Mario's, where we can sit a little more quietly. I still have a few questions to discuss with you." I looked at my watch, realized I had some time, and agreed. An hour later, we were only halfway through our meal, and he was asking me questions that I couldn't stop asking. How much did he need to know about our company and our products? And as for me, I better call my wife and warn her that I might be a little late, I explained to him as I headed to the toilet, not wanting him to hear the explosion that would no doubt follow. I decided to give him 10 more minutes, and then reluctantly interrupt him and explain why I had to leave. You might think twice before leaving such an important client, but I still had some time. What are you doing? Jody yelled at me over the phone when I told her, not ready to listen to my protests, that we still had time. I warned you, Dave, that if you were late, you would regret it. I'm not going to miss this vacation, even if I have to go without you. I tried to calm her down, but to no avail. When I hung up, we were both angry at each other, and she stopped listening to my explanations. I decided to simply go back to Butch and explain my problem to him and ask him to return to our plant on his own. This would have saved me 20 minutes, and I would have gotten home maybe 5 minutes later than planned. Butch was a married man and would no doubt understand. Well, Dave, he greeted me when I returned to the table. It's time for me to be honest with you, because I know that you are in a hurry and you have a plane. Oh shit, what does this all mean? How does he know this? What is he going to tell me? I sat and waited for the axe to fall, convinced that he was going to refuse a new large order that I thought we already had in our pocket. How does he know I'm in such a hurry? I obviously messed everything up by trying to speed up the process. Why didn't I tell him at the beginning of our meeting that I had a busy schedule? I want you to work for me, Dave, Butch said confidently. How about moving to live in the States? I had that moment where you just can't lift your jaw back up to meet the rest of your face. Please repeat, I demanded when I came to my senses. All these questions, Dave, I was testing you. George didn't tell you, but we're about to get a license to manufacture your rigs in the US, and we need someone with your knowledge to help us do it. But, was all I could say before Butch continued. George suggested you, Dave, as the best candidate. Of course, he doesn't want to lose you, but this deal could make all scans a fortune over the next decade or so, and he says you're the man to make it happen. George knows? I asked weakly. Of course he does, Dave, but he didn't want to say too much until I met you and was sure you were the one I wanted. I collapsed back into my chair with the most incredible warm feeling running through me. Moving to live and work in America as the head of a large company. Jody will go crazy with joy when I tell her about this because we were both still talking about what a great time we had there and how much we wanted to go back. But never in my life did I expect to return under such conditions. I listened in amazement as he quickly laid out a package of offers. A salary I could barely imagine, a stock option, a company BMW, an apartment until we found ours. It just never ended. Well, you have a plane to catch, he finished. Perhaps you will give me your answer when you return from vacation and discuss this with your wife. I'll give you my answer now, I found the strength to stammer. I agree, and I am absolutely sure that my wife will agree. We both stood up and shook hands, and Butch hurried off to send me off to pick up my wife and catch the plane. I went out with my head in the clouds, making sure I still had time. I was running out of time, but I picked up my cell phone while walking to the parking lot and dialed my home number. He called. Well, of course he would, wouldn't he? But then he called and called and called. No one answered. I checked the time and found that it was 2 minutes later than the time I originally said I would be home. By then, I had already reached my car, and as soon as I put the key in the ignition, I automatically dialed Jody's cell phone number. I didn't even have time to put it into gear when she answered. Where the hell are you? She shouted into the phone. I'm on my way home, honey, I replied. And wait until you hear what I have to say. To hell with you, Dave, you bastard, she interrupted me. You don't care about me, do you? For a moment I was speechless, but unfortunately she was not. Your damn job is all you think about. You do not care about me. I had to call Terry to take me to the airport because I knew you wouldn't make it in time. Terry? Oh yeah, that's Terry Jones, the art teacher she works with. A dandy who thinks he knows everything. The fact that he was the one Jody exchanged kisses with when I angered her earlier didn't add any points to him in my eyes. Jody, I begged her, I'm almost on our street, and I'll only be 3 or 4 minutes late. It's too late, Dave, Jody replied. I'm already half at the airport. If you're not there, I'll leave without you." She switched off the phone, and despite my attempts to call her back, there was no answer. I checked the time and thought how stupid this all was. I still had plenty of time to get to the airport and check in, so I turned the car around and headed towards Stansted, arriving as expected with at least half an hour to spare. I parked, grabbed my parking ticket, and headed to the departure terminal, hoping that Jody would at least take my suitcase with her. I was looking for her. I looked but could not find her, and by that time was getting short. I finally walked up to the front desk and asked if my wife had checked in. "Oh yeah, right here," the pretty blonde said after searching through her list. "She checked in about 15 minutes ago, Mrs. Martin and Mr. Jones. They have places 24B and C." What? My first reaction scared the poor girl, and I had to apologize for my outburst. "There's some kind of mistake here," I argued. "Mrs. Bass Martin, but not Mr. Jones." Deaf girl saw that I was clearly upset and double-checked everything for me. "No, that's right," she finally confirmed to me. "The tickets were booked in the names of Mr. and Mrs. Martin, but Mrs. Martin changed one of them to Mr. Jones." Could she do this? I muttered, not believing what I heard. "Yes," the girl answered, beginning to feel sorry for me, realizing that something strange was happening. "There is a charge of £40 for this, but she obviously paid it." I stood there like a refugee or something, not knowing what to say or what to do. "He had his passport with him, Mr. Bars Martin," she added apologetically, "so everything seemed okay." I thanked her for her help and sadly walked away from the counter. What's happening? What is she up to? This is no longer a joke. Looking at the departure board, it immediately became clear that the plane had not yet taken off, and moreover, landing had not even begun. I rushed to the boarding gate, but couldn't get past the counter into the lounge. "No boarding pass, no entry, it is clear." I argued and persuaded, but when it became obvious that they were going to call security, I gave up, went to the bar, and sat there with my head in my hands. I couldn't believe it, I just couldn't believe it. My world had been turned upside down in half an hour. Jody couldn't know, she couldn't really go to Spain with that damn Terry Jones instead of me. This is impossible. Please someone tell me that this is simply impossible and that I was just dreaming it. Then I had an idea. Not the most successful, as it turned out, but then it seemed good. After rushing to the other side of the airport, I finally reached the observation hall. In earlier times, this might have been an open terrace, but in these times of terrorism, we had to look at the planes through huge glass windows. To my complete surprise, I saw her. My wife, my Jody, heading across the tarmac towards the waiting Boeing 737. I couldn't help but notice her. Of course, few people have such long blonde hair and such a slender figure as she does. Then I saw that damn Jones getting off the bus behind her and following her to the plane. When he caught up with her, I completely lost my temper, because even at such a distance I could not help but notice how he put his arm around her waist, and even more so I could not help but notice how she leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. The guards, I think, were just doing their job. I know I shouldn't knock like a madman against the glass window and scream the way I did. They couldn't hear me at that distance anyway, and Jody didn't even look back. They released me from the detention center without charge when they decided I was no longer a threat to the other passengers, and I walked dejectedly back to my car. I tried calling Jody on her cell phone, but of course it was no use. What a nightmare, what a damn nightmare. I think I cried that night, but I'm not sure because I was so drunk when I walked home from the local pub that I couldn't say anything for sure. I couldn't even call her in Spain because I didn't have a number and her mobile didn't work in another country. Around noon the next day, I came to my senses from the loud ringing of the phone next to me. I realized that I had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching my phone tightly to me. Why? I have no idea. "Hello," I muttered into the phone, not knowing what to expect. "Is that you, John?" came my wife's authoritative voice, sounding exactly like the teacher she was. "Yes, it's me," I answered simply. "Well?" "Well," I answered. "You're not even going to apologize, you bastard," Jody screamed. Don't you care that you let me down again? Did I let you down? I asked a question, but she continued to yell how I don't care about her feelings and think only about my work. What about when you didn't come to dinner with our new neighbors because of some problem at your school? I reminded her, although it was pointless. And besides, I made it to the airport on time. This is different, Dave, and you know it, Jody shouted at me, although from my point of view, it was not different. I realized that we were just yelling at each other without purpose, and I tried to change tactics. Having just woken up, I had not yet fully come to my senses and forgot half of what happened the evening before and tried to tell her about the proposal from Butch. Jody, I said in a more even tone, there is something I need to tell you about my work. I was offered a... Again, you're talking about your damn job, Jody interrupted me again. Your job is all you think about. What about me here, alone in Spain? Only then did everything come to mind, and suddenly my love for Jody began to dissolve. Alone in Spain, Jody? I asked. What about Terry Jones? She went silent on the other end, clearly startled that I knew he was with her. What about him? She asked quietly. Are you still in bed with him? I continued. There was another pause, and then she answered. Even if it is, you deserve it, bastard. It's all your fault. Did you have good sex with him? I asked angrily. Better than with you, Dave, Jody replied just as angrily. So worry, mister. Nobody. The line went dead as she hung up, or rather, she probably hung up. If my marriage wasn't already dead, then maybe that last comment did it for good. The next morning, although not too early, I found myself in George's office discussing a new job. He was a little surprised that I was not in Spain, but I avoided a direct answer. Why didn't you mention this? I asked. I couldn't, he protested. Not until he met you properly and decided you were the right person. Thank you very much, I continued. It may have cost me my marriage. I told him my story of troubles, but to my surprise, he did not express much surprise. The husband is always the last to know, Dave, George said finally. What do you mean by this? Nothing in particular, Dave, he explained. But at the last two corporate events, your wife Jody, well, let's just say she exposed herself. What do you mean? I asked, not looking into it too much considering the other problems I had. But he just shrugged, and I slowly began to draw my own conclusions. Damn it! Who is this woman that I have loved and been married to for all these years? Wait until you see Mei Lin, George said with a smile on his face, trying to change the subject. Mei who? I asked, not showing much interest. Mei Lin, she is every man's dream. Dream? I asked, completely lost. She's your new secretary, sorry, personal assistant, he happily told me. Asian American, I met her last month when I was there. I just looked at him. Lucky bastard, he said with an envious note. Just wait until you see her. If you lose one, you will find another. The next few days passed in a bit of a blur, partly due to my marital problems and partly due to the speed with which my transfer was happening. As much as one side was interested in me moving and starting work, the other side was pushing the process so that the license could be officially issued. I felt like my feet were barely touching the ground. Then Jody called again. I knew she would call, and somehow I knew it would be mid-morning. Hello, love, she greeted me. I decided to call to let you know how wonderful it is here. I need to tell you something, Jody. I began, just like before. It doesn't matter, my love, she interrupted me again. Are you ready to apologize for your behavior, sweetie? Listen, Jody, I tried to say, ignoring her stupid comments. I really need to tell you something. Sorry, love, Jody interrupted again, although I didn't really try to interrupt her. I still love you, and when you are ready to apologize, we will continue our lives, but for now I have someone else to entertain me. I just hung up, although I'm not sure which of us did it first. Jody sounded drunk. Not to the point of unconsciousness, but too drunk to get anything coherent out of her. If she thought having sex with the art teacher was more important than our chance at a future together, that was her problem, not mine. The week continued the most unusual week of my life. On the one hand, the most exciting, on the other, the saddest. How will this all end? The next call from Jody was more unexpected, coming in the early morning hours. "Hi, Dave," she muttered. "I just had a thought. How did you know Terry was here with me?" "I saw you together when you boarded the plane," I told her, trying to collect my thoughts after sleep, surprised that she was calling at such a time to ask such a question. "You were there, Dave? Were you really there?" "Of course I was there, Jody," I told her, my anger beginning to rise. "How do you think I knew that scoundrel Jones was with you?" "Why didn't you stop us, Dave? Why didn't you do anything?" "Did what?" I almost shouted into the phone. "I arrived on time for the flight, but you had already checked in with your boyfriend, and they didn't let me in. As a result, I was arrested. But I thought you wouldn't come, Dave." Terry offered to give me a ride to the airport, and in a fit of anger, I asked him to come with me. "Honestly, I didn't know you were there, honey." "Did your damn friend Terry happen to take his luggage and passport with him?" I asked sarcastically. "Oh shit. Oh, Dave, But I hung up before she could continue. I think she called me a few more times, but I was either not at home, too busy getting ready, or I simply didn't answer. Finally, after a few days, I picked up the phone. "Hello, is it you, Dave?" I heard. "Yes, Jody, it's me," I replied. "What do you want?" "You, Dave, I want you. Terry has been such a bastard, and I need you." I muttered something incomprehensible. "I came back to my room last night, and he was there with some girl in my bed." "In my room," Jody sobbed. "How terrible for you." "Can you imagine, Dave? How can someone do this?" "It's really hard to imagine," I replied, trying not to laugh. "Go on holiday with someone, and they leave to cheat with someone else behind your back," she muttered, and I realized she had had a little too much to drink again. How could he? "I can't find an explanation," I answered, trying to feign sympathy. "Dave, I'll come home earlier. I can't be here anymore. I'll fly to Heathrow at 4 o'clock tomorrow. This was the only flight I could take. Can you pick me up?" I wanted to say no when I suddenly realized that I could. "Certainly can." "Meet me at 4 o'clock, I said dryly. "You were trying to tell me something the last time you called, Dave," she surprised me. "Something about your work?" "Oh, nothing important, Jody," I told her. "I don't want to bother you with my work." She will find out in due time anyway. I was ready for her at 2:30 and was a little annoyed when her plane landed 20 minutes late. When she walked through the arrival gate, I waited for her like a devoted husband. I'm sure there was even a smile on my face. "Hi, Dave, my darling, it's so great to see you," she screamed when she saw me, and throwing her suitcase, she hugged me and kissed me with as much passion as she was capable of. I must say, she looked amazing. Jody's tan always suited her, and her blonde hair accentuated it. "Let's go home, honey," Jody whispered to me. "I missed you so much, and I can't wait to make love to you." All thoughts that I should apologize somehow disappeared. Looks like she loves me again. "Let's drink coffee or tea first," I suggested. "No, let's go straight home," my wife insisted. "No, we'll have a drink first," I insisted and took her to the nearest cafe. "Have a nice holiday, Jody?" I asked, ordering her coffee and tea for myself. "It was good at first," she answered quietly. "Sorry if I went a little overboard." "Terry isn't as good in bed as you thought?" I asked. Jody looked at me sadly, and a tear slowly rolled down her cheek. "Not really," she began to tell. "Then I found that bastard with one of the maids. In my bed, in my room." I did not remind her that they shared this room, and that, in any case, it was our bed and our room. After all, I paid for this vacation. "Can you imagine, Dave?" she continued. "We were supposed to be on vacation together, and he went and slept with someone else, leaving me alone. This must be difficult for you, my dear," I sympathized. After all, I knew how it was. "Okay, to hell with it. He will get what he deserves. Can we go home now, Dave? I really want to fix everything." I tried to explain to her that I tried to tell her the news several times, but every time she interrupted me. "It can wait, Dave," she interrupted again. "Let's go home, and you'll tell me on the way." I didn't have to think long. My decision was already made a long time ago. Here are the car keys, Jody, I told her, arriving in her old car, since my company car had been returned to all scans a day early. And here are the keys to the house. They are all yours. Ours, you mean, Dave? No, only yours, Jody, only yours, I explained to her. The documents are issued in your name, and the bills are paid by the end of the month. If you decide to sell it, you might have enough money left over for a couple more weeks in Spain. Jody looked at me blankly, not realizing what I was saying to her. And by the way, I noticed that one of your wheels is almost bald, and a strange sound is coming from the gearbox. Jody continued to look at me, not understanding. What I was trying to tell you, Jody, I continued, I was offered a fantastic job in America. Great salary, great benefits, everything I ever dreamed of. Jody had a huge smile on her face when she heard the news. I felt a little sad. When are we going there? She asked enthusiastically, having forgotten our conversation a few minutes earlier. I'm leaving on British Airways in 40 minutes, Jody, I replied. Do you have a ticket for me too? She asked excitedly. No, I answered. When will I follow you? Jody continued. You won't follow, Jody, I told her. Sorry, but you won't follow. 10 minutes later, I walked into the waiting room alone, leaving Jody crying at the counter, behind which she was not allowed to go further. My last look at her forever. There was a look on her face, covered in tears, as she stood and watched me leave her life. Ironically, it was a déjà vu moment, only the roles were completely reversed. Just 10 days ago, I stood at the counter, unable to follow the one I loved. Different airports and different destinations, but I'm sure the heartbreak was just as painful. 9 years, 3 months, and 6 days after. I was back at Heathrow, in the same terminal I had flown from all those years ago. This wasn't my first visit back, but this time I stayed for 2 weeks and planned to stay much longer. The licensing agreement with Butch's company in Huntington, USA, turned out to be a huge success, and I rose to become CEO of that division of his company and a large shareholder. Butch had long been a personal friend of mine, and in another twist of fate, it was through him that George invited me to return to the UK and take up the post of managing director of all scans. When he was retiring, the company had grown significantly since I left, largely due to the relationship with us in America, which opened up their products to a much larger market. It made sense for everyone, and especially for me, since along with this position, I ended up acquiring a significant stake in this company. I was waiting in the arrival area for an old colleague from the company, Butch, who was incredibly helpful from the very beginning. Although they were no longer working there, it was a joy to know that they would be joining me in the UK. Even before I saw her, I felt her arrival, as almost all the men in the waiting crowd became wary when they saw her and probably sucked in their stomachs. My Lynn was as beautiful as the day I first saw her, perhaps even more so, and her smile seemed to light up the entire terminal when she noticed me. Leaning towards her 2 companions, she pointed at me, and they both rushed towards me. Dad, Dad, I've missed you. Maddie, our 5-year-old daughter, screamed as she jumped into my arms. She was a miniature version of her mother and had already left several broken boys behind in America when she went to live in Britain. Hi, Dad, our 8-year-old son greeted me, a little less spontaneously, but with a smile that said it all. He was already tall for his age, and I couldn't wait to see him move from American football to the European version, soccer. Maybe one day he will play for Arsenal. The first day of the rest of our lives, my beautiful wife said, rising to kiss me. Indeed, how true. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.